You ever find yourself like just sitting on a park bench or maybe,
Oh, people watching.
yeah, exactly, looking out the window of a coffee shop, just watching the sheer chaos of a city?
It's overwhelming, honestly.
It really is.
Mm.
You see hundreds of people streaming by. One person is, sprinting to this high-stakes corporate meeting, clutching a briefcase like their life depends on it.
Right.
Another is meticulously planting a community garden. You've got a teenager glued to a screen, obsessively curating a social media profile, and maybe a couple arguing passionately on a street corner.
Just in a massive web of motivation.
Exactly. And if you take a step back, the sheer volume of human activity, the complexity of it all, is entirely overwhelming. And we have all these frameworks, right? Modern psychology, sociology, evolutionary biology, they all offer us these massive, sprawling frameworks to explain why we do what we do.
Oh, yeah. Maslow's hierarchy of needs with its pyramids and tiers.
Right.
Freud's tangled web of the unconscious. We have dozens of behavioral matrices, cognitive biases, intricate theories of motivation.
We've built an entire academic industry around the idea that human beings are infinitely complex creatures, driven by this dizzying, almost incomprehensible array of sophisticated motives.
It is the ultimate puzzle, and frankly, we like to see ourselves that way.
Oh, for sure. We love it.
We find comfort in the idea of our own complexity. It feels validating, to believe that our desires to build towering skyscrapers or compose symphonies or wage global conflicts or even just fall in love are the results of highly advanced, uniquely human psychological architecture.
Because if we're complicated, we're special.
Exactly. And when you look at the surface of human history, it does resemble an incredibly tangled, unsolvable knot.
But what if that complexity is actually an illusion?
That is the big question.
Right. What if, when you strip away the social media, the careers, the politics, the art, the architecture, what if the engine driving all of this is remarkably, almost terrifyingly simple?
And that's what we're getting into today.
Yes. Today, our deep dive is tackling a source text that just takes an absolute sledgehammer to our assumptions about human complexity.
It really does.
We are looking at an incredibly analytical, highly provocative framework authored entirely by Dr. Khaled Waleed. In his writing, Dr. Waleed explores a concept he calls the pact of instinct and pacted control.
And the methodology he uses to build this framework is what makes it so striking to me.
Yeah, it's very different.
Because Dr. Waleed doesn't rely on modern clinical psychology or observational sociology. He constructs his entire theory of human behavior through this really unique fusion of rigorous linguistic analysis, specifically breaking down ancient Arabic etymologies, combined with philosophical deduction and deeply layered Quranic exegesis.
Right. And before we jump into the deep end of this framework, we need to set a clear boundary for you, the listener. Dr. Waleed's text is fundamentally grounded in Islamic theology.
Yes, that's the core of his source material.
The architecture of his argument is built upon specific Quranic verses, and he uses the stories of the prophets, particularly the story of Adam and Eve, as his primary case studies.
Which means we are dealing with religious texts and theological interpretations.
Wait, actually, let me rephrase that, because we aren't here to play theologian.
No, not at all.
Our goal today is not to endorse, validate, or debate the religious viewpoints presented in the text. We aren't here to argue the theology. Our mission for this deep dive is to impartially explore and unpack Dr. Waleed's intricate philosophical framework.
Right, we're looking at the mechanics of his argument.
We want to understand how his linguistic theories work and how he uses those theories to radically redefine the human condition. We are treating this text as an exploration of a very specific, deeply constructed worldview.
It is a worldview that demands we throw out almost everything we think we know about our own motivations.
Pretty much everything.
Because Dr. Waleed's core thesis is that humanity is not driven by a complex web of needs. He posits that human beings are born with only two fundamental instincts, just two primal codes running the entire human operating system.
Only two. I mean, when I first read that, my immediate reaction was just complete skepticism.
Same here.
Boiling the absolute entirety of human complexity down to two drives feels impossible. But Dr. Waleed labels them very clearly. The first instinct he identifies is eating, which he equates entirely to the drive for possession and control.
And the second instinct is reproduction, which he equates to the drive for immortality and continuation.
So every single complex behavior you or I exhibit, according to Dr. Waleed, stems directly from one of those two primal roots.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to justify such a radical simplification, Dr. Waleed takes us back to what he frames as the very first case study of human behavior.
Right, the story of Adam and Eve.
Yes, but he approaches it through a uniquely analytical lens. He isn't just reading it as a historical or theological event, He's dissecting it as a psychological blueprint for the human species.
He focuses on the nature of the temptation itself, like the actual interaction with Satan or Iblis.
Yes. Dr. Waleed points out a crucial detail about how that manipulation occurred. When Satan wanted to subvert humanity, he didn't use some sort of complex, incomprehensible magic.
He didn't just overpower them.
No, he didn't use overwhelming external force to conquer Adam and Eve. Instead, he went straight for the source code. Dr. Waleed asserts that the secret of life lies entirely in these two primary instincts, eating and reproduction. So Satan simply weaponized our own biology against us.
I am stuck on that phrase, weaponizing our biology, because when you look at the text, Dr. Waleed is framing temptation not as a mystical supernatural force that overpowers our free will, but as a highly calculated systematic pressure applied to our innate biological needs.
Yes, that's the core of it.
It's like Satan is acting like a hacker. He finds the two unpatched vulnerabilities in the human operating system, and he just exploits them.
And Dr. Waleed highlights the exact nature of the exploit. He draws our attention to the specific promises Satan made in the narrative, because Satan didn't tempt them with a random assortment of worldly desires.
Right, he was very specific.
He promised them two highly specific outcomes. First, he promised them sovereignty, or the ability to become angels, which, in Dr. Waleed's framework, represents the ultimate form of possession, sovereignty, and control.
And that maps directly to the instinct of eating.
Exactly.
And the second promise.
The second promise was eternal life, becoming immortals. And this is the ultimate absolute fulfillment of the instinct for reproduction, the drive for endless continuation.
Okay, I have to stop and play devil's advocate here.
Or
well, pushback, I guess. Because I'm trying to map this onto everyday human life, and I'm struggling to see how everything fits into just two boxes.
It's a tight squeeze for sure.
Let's look at basic psychology.
Sure.
What about the instinct for shelter? Or the drive to create a safe environment? Like, if I spend 6 months building a house to keep my family out of the rain, I'm not eating and I am not reproducing. I am seeking safety.
Right.
How can Dr. Waleed possibly argue that the drive for shelter doesn't exist as its own fundamental instinct?
Well, what's fascinating here is that Dr. Waleed would argue you are looking at the branch and calling it the trunk.
Oh, okay.
His framework absorbs those seemingly distinct drives and traces them down to the deeper root. Let's take your example of building a house for shelter. In Dr. Waleed's paradigm, seeking shelter, claiming a piece of land, erecting walls to keep the elements out, that is fundamentally an act of possession.
Oh, I see.
You are exerting dominance and control over a specific piece of your environment to sustain your physical presence. You are claiming sovereignty over that space. Therefore, building a house falls squarely under the broader instinct of possession, which he categorizes under eating.
Wow. So anything that involves acquiring resources, securing a perimeter, or asserting control over my physical environment is just a manifestation of the possession instinct.
That is his premise, yes.
Fine, but what about social connection? What about community building or creating art or wanting to be remembered after you die? Let's say I dedicate my life to writing a novel or building a philanthropic foundation.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with physical possession, and it's certainly not biological reproduction.
But look at the end goal of those actions. Social connection, establishing a legacy, building a community, writing a novel. These are all mechanisms of continuation.
Continuation.
Yes. You want your ideas, your influence, your tribe, or your name to survive beyond your individual physical lifespan. You are trying to ensure that a part of you persists in the world after you are gone.
Oh, wow.
Dr. Waleed categorizes all of that as the instinct of reproduction. It is the drive for immortality, playing out on a social or intellectual level rather than a purely genetic one.
It seems like to truly grasp Dr. Waleed's theory, we have to completely dismantle our everyday definitions of these words. I mean, I can't just think of eating as sitting down to a plate of food or reproduction as just having a child.
No, not at all.
We have to elevate these words from simple biological functions to profound philosophical concepts.
Which is exactly why Dr. Waleed leans so heavily into linguistic analysis. To understand his worldview, you have to understand his definition of the Arabic word for eating, which is al-aql.
Al-aql.
Yes. He spends a significant portion of the text breaking down the etymological roots of this word. He does not define eating as the biological process of digestion.
So how does he define it?
He defines eating as the act of separating apart from a continuous whole in order to exert total control over it.
Separating apart from a continuous whole in order to exert total control over it.
Yes.
I really want to sit with that definition for a second, because it completely shifts the perspective on what it means to interact with the world. It frames eating as an act of conquest.
It is an act of subjugation. You are taking something that exists independently in the world, severing it from its natural context, and making it a part of your own domain.
It's like the concept of mining.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Let's say you are looking at a massive continuous mountain. That mountain is a whole entity. Then you go in and you separate a chunk of gold ore from that mountain. You pull it out, you refine it, you melt it down, you put that gold coin in your pocket.
Right.
You now have total, absolute control over that piece of the mountain. Under Dr. Waleed's linguistic framework, you didn't just mine that gold, you ate it.
That is a perfect application of his theory. You took a part of the external world, separated it, and subjugated it to your will.
That's wild.
And because human beings are multidimensional, we aren't just physical bodies, we have intellects and souls. Dr. Waleed expands this concept of eating across different dimensions of our existence. He introduces what we can call his 3 rules of eating.
Because we don't just consume on a physical level.
Exactly. Let's break down those 3 rules. The first one seems the most straightforward.
Right.
The first rule is the food of the body. This is the literal consumption of physical sustenance. We separate crops from the earth or animals from the herd to fuel our biological form.
Makes sense.
But Dr. Waleed adds a very specific philosophical caveat here. He notes that this physical consumption is meant to sustain us for a limited, tangible lifespan. It is a purely practical necessity.
The text uses a really interesting phrase for this. Dr. Waleed refers to this physical eating as an Islam of the mind for what is sensory and tangible.
Yes.
Now, for a listener who hears the word Islam and immediately thinks only of the formal religion, that phrase might be confusing. How does a religion apply to eating a carrot?
We have to look at the linguistic root of the word Islam, which fundamentally means submission or surrender, often in the context of achieving peace.
Right.
When Dr. Waleed says physical eating is an Islam of the mind, he is using the word in its linguistic, non-theological sense. He means that our intellect logically surrenders or peacefully submits to the undeniable physical reality that our bodies require fuel to survive.
Oh, okay.
It is a logical acceptance of our biological limits. The mind recognizes, I am in a physical body, it needs energy, therefore I must consume physical matter. It is the lowest, most basic, and most strictly utilitarian level of the eating instinct.
Got it. So the intellect submits to the reality of the stomach. That makes perfect sense. Level 1 is physical fuel. What is the second rule of eating?
The second rule is the food of the soul. And this is where Dr. Waleed does something truly unexpected. He links the concept of eating directly to the second primal instinct, reproduction.
Wait, what?
Yes. He describes reproduction as the division of souls to ensure the continuation of the species.
I'm having a really hard time connecting those 2 dots. How is having a child a form of eating? The mechanics don't seem to line up. Eating is taking something in, reproduction is putting something out into the world.
Let's go back to his foundational definition of eating, separating apart from a whole to exert control.
Right.
When human beings reproduce, they are taking a part of themselves, their genetic material, their lineage, their soul, and separating it to create a new whole. Why do they do this?
To ensure their legacy.
Exactly. To ensure that their legacy, their influence, and their genetic code continue to exert control and presence over the future.
So it's not about consuming physical matter. It's about consuming the timeline.
Precisely. It is a way of eating time.
Eating time. Wow.
The individual human lifespan is limited, so the soul eats the future by extending its presence through offspring. It is how we ensure our survival beyond our own inevitable death. We subjugate the future by populating it with our lineage.
That is a staggering philosophical leap. He is arguing that the profound human desire to have children, to build a family, to leave a lasting legacy, all of that is driven by the exact same underlying psychological mechanics as the desire to consume a meal.
Yes.
It is the drive to possess and control, just operating on the macro timeline of the species rather than the micro timeline of an individual afternoon.
And that leads us to the highest dimension in his framework. The third rule is the food of the spirit. According to Dr. Waleed, the ultimate form of consumption is the consumption of knowledge.
The consumption of knowledge. Okay, let me see if I can map his definition onto this. The universe of information is the continuous whole.
Right.
And learning is the act of separating a specific piece of that truth from the unknown, internalizing it, and using it to exert control over our environment.
That is exactly how we views it.
Think about the entire digital age. We are constantly eating data. The internet is this endless, continuous stream of information.
For a perfect example.
When I find a research paper, extract a specific methodology from it, and apply it to my own work to solve a problem, I have separated apart from the whole, internalized it, and used it to increase my sovereignty over my work.
And Dr. Waleed views this pursuit of knowledge, this food of the spirit, as the ultimate good. It is the highest, most refined fulfillment of the eating instinct. We are breaking off pieces of the universe's infinite mystery and using them to assert our intellectual sovereignty.
But if eating is fundamentally about separating and controlling, that has massive implications for how we view negative behaviors too, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Because I noticed Dr. Waleed's text references concepts like eating people's money unjustly or eating usury. In common parlance, we treat those phrases as metaphors, like he ate my savings.
Right.
But under Dr. Waleed's linguistic rules, that isn't a metaphor at all, is it?
Not in the slightest. Within his framework, it is highly literal. If the definition of eating is separating apart to exert total control, then embezzlement, theft, corruption, and predatory lending like usury are pure, unadulterated forms of eating.
Because you are extracting resources from the communal whole. Society is the whole, the communal wealth is the continuous entity, and the predatory lender separates a massive chunk of that wealth for their own exclusive, controlling possession.
And by doing so, they are feeding that primal instinct of possession, but they're doing it at the expense of the collective organism.
Yeah.
It is a destructive, parasitic form of consumption. It is the total extraction of wealth purely to feed the drive for dominance.
It paints a horrifying picture of human greed. It frames a corrupt billionaire or a predatory institution not just as selfish, but as a mindless biological organism, blindly consuming everything around it just to fuel a base instinct.
Exactly.
They're no different than a locust swarm, just operating with bank accounts instead of mandibles.
And Dr. Waleed's analysis doesn't stop at physical resources or abstract wealth. Here's where it gets really interesting. He takes this definition of eating, this act of separating and consuming, and he points it directly at history. He points it at culture. And this is where he introduces what might be the most fascinating and definitely the most relevant concept in the entire text.
You were talking about heritage obesity.
Yes.
The Arabic term he uses is al-sumna al-turathiyya. We really need to unpack this because when I read this section, it felt like he was diagnosing a modern societal disease. Walk us through Dr. Waleed's definition of heritage obesity.
Well, Dr. Waleed draws a direct parallel between the physical body and the intellect. He argues that just as a person can become physically obese and unhealthy by overindulging in physical food without any rules or dietary restraint, a mind or an entire society can become ideologically obese.
Ideologically obese.
Yes. By overindulging in heritage or tradition, it happens when people indiscriminately swallow the past.
Swallowing the past without chewing. Let's look at the mechanics of this because it's a brilliant metaphor. How exactly does an individual or a culture eat heritage?
In Dr. Waleed's view, eating heritage occurs when a culture gathers up all of its traditions, its historical narratives, the habits of its ancestors, and consumes them without applying any strict, logical, discerning rules.
They just take it all in.
Exactly. They don't analyze the ideas. They don't chew on them to see what is actually nutritious. They fail to separate the timeless wisdom from the toxic, outdated waste. The text uses a highly specific Arabic phrase to describe this blind consumption. Akla in laman.
Aklan and laman.
Yes. This phrase implies a sweeping, indiscriminate devouring. It means gathering the good, the bad, the healthy, and the rotten all together and swallowing it whole just because it is placed in front of you.
So they are taking on everything. They are absorbing the beautiful cultural practices, the profound art, the hard-won wisdom of their ancestors, but they are simultaneously swallowing ancient prejudices, outdated superstitions, historical grievances, and flawed methodologies.
Right.
Dr. Waleed explicitly mentions that this includes absorbing what he describes as pagan influences or corrupt frameworks alongside actual truth.
And the consequence of that indiscriminate consumption is disease. Dr. Waleed argues that this psychological obesity causes a society to lose its lightness, its agility, and its competence. He writes that our mental steps become heavy.
Heavy steps.
When we are weighed down by the sheer mass of unexamined tradition, we become paralyzed.
We lose the ability to move forward.
We lose the ability to innovate, to adapt to new realities, or to seek true knowledge, the food of the spirit, because we are expending all of our energy dragging the bloated corpse of history behind us.
Wow.
We are so full of the past that we have no room to consume the future.
I have been trying to think of a modern analogy for this, and the best way I can visualize it is like a smartphone running on a bloated 20-year-old operating system.
Okay, I like that.
Imagine you have this device, and you absolutely refuse to delete any legacy code, any old files, or any outdated software patches. Whenever the system flags a bug, you say, no, leave it. That bug is tradition. It's how this phone has always operated. It's part of the phone's heritage.
Right.
What happens to that device?
Right. It becomes non-functional.
Right. Eventually, your phone is so heavy with background processes running ancient, useless code that it can't run any new applications. It freezes. It crashes. It takes 10 minutes just to open a basic text message.
Yeah.
You lose your freedom of movement in the digital space, exactly as Dr. Waleed describes losing our mental agility. The tool becomes entirely useless because it's choked by its own past.
That analogy perfectly captures the paralysis Dr. Waleed is describing. The legacy code is the heritage obesity. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this intellectual paralysis is not an accident. Think back to the very beginning of his theory. Remember the two fundamental instincts and who it is that weaponizes them.
Satan, the hacker finding the vulnerability in our drive to consume.
Dr. Waleed views this state of intellectual obesity as the ultimate successful outcome of that satanic manipulation. The adversary's goal is to keep humanity mentally bloated, slow, and docile.
Because if you are constantly regurgitating and obsessing over toxic heritage, you are not exercising your sovereign intellect. You are trapped in a cycle of blind imitation. You are just a passive vessel for old code.
You aren't thinking, you're just echoing. And that is the antithesis of the divine intent. According to Dr. Waleed's reading, the goal for humanity is to possess intellectual agility. The ultimate state is sovereignty of mind.
Sovereignty of mind.
Yes. You are meant to be light, capable of sharp critical thought, and completely free from the heavy chains of unexamined tradition.
It fundamentally redefines the battleground of human freedom. I mean, the real threat isn't physical enslavement. It's the difference between being a mindless consumer of historical information and an active, sovereign thinker.
Right.
Dr. Waleed is essentially giving a public health warning for the mind. Watch your mental diet. If you just open your mouth and eat whatever tradition or culture or your political tribe puts on your plate, you'll become intellectually obese, and an obese mind is easily controlled.
He issues a stark warning in the text. He writes that through this indiscriminate eating of heritage, the instinct actually turns around and possesses us, rather than us possessing the instinct.
That's chilling.
We think we are preserving our history, but our history is actually consuming our future. Our thoughts become heavy, as he puts it, until we become helpless and end. It is a profound critique of intellectual passivity.
Okay, we have thoroughly mapped out the first primal instinct, eating, or the drive for possession. We've seen how Dr. Waleed tracks it from the consumption of physical calories to the hoarding of wealth, all the way to the uncritical devouring of historical traditions. The framework is incredibly cohesive.
It really is.
Now, we need to shift our focus to the second instinct he identified, reproduction, or the drive for immortality. We need to explore how he maps this biological drive onto our social and ideological connections. And to do that, Dr. Waleed takes us back to the story of Adam and Eve, focusing on the most famous element of that narrative, the forbidden tree.
Yes, the tree. The divine command given in the garden was explicit. Eat from wherever you wish, but do not approach this tree. Now, in popular culture and traditional tellings, we usually picture a literal piece of vegetation, an apple tree, a fig tree, some physical plant. But Dr. Waleed, maintaining his rigorous analytical framework, interprets this tree as a pure metaphor.
Which tracks logically with everything we've discussed so far.
Right.
If he has radically redefined the concept of eating as an act of separating and controlling, he also has to redefine what is being eaten. So, in Dr. Waleed's framework, what is the tree?
For Dr. Waleed, the forbidden tree represents a malicious lineage or a corrupt polytheistic ideological system. He describes it as a framework of belief that inherently leads to destruction, which he refers to textually as the fire.
I'm trying to follow the logical jump here. How does a textual analysis move from a tree in a garden to a corrupt ideological lineage? That seems like a massive leap.
He bridges that gap by leaning into ancient, deeply ingrained metaphors of lineage and social contracts. Think about how we describe human ancestry. We literally call it a family tree.
Oh, of course.
It has roots grounded in the past, it has a trunk representing the core identity, it branches out into different families, and it bears fruit, which are the offspring, the next generation.
Okay, I see exactly where this is going.
Dr. Waleed argues that the divine command, do not approach this tree, wasn't a dietary restriction about avoiding a piece of fruit.
Right.
It was a dire warning about who you connect your lineage to. It was a command aimed squarely at controlling the instinct of reproduction.
So if the drive for reproduction is the drive for immortality, the drive to ensure your soul and your lineage continue into the future, the warning is about how you choose to secure that immortality.
Yes. This is where Dr. Waleed introduces his profound reinterpretation of marriage. This framework forces us to ask a difficult question. What is the actual purpose of marriage and social connection?
Okay.
In Dr. Waleed's view, God made marriage lawful with very specific, highly logical parameters. And the reason for those parameters was to prevent humanity from connecting their lineage with destructive, corrupt ideological systems, which the text refers to as polytheists, or the malicious tree.
I have to play devil's advocate again here because this sounds incredibly clinical. Is Dr. Waleed suggesting that who we connect with, who we fall in love with, who we choose to build a family with, should be fundamentally an ideological and intellectual choice? That the forbidden tree is essentially a toxic worldview, and marriage is just a quarantine system?
It sounds clinical to modern ears because we prioritize romanticism. But in Dr. Waleed's framework, romanticism without logic is just biological enslavement.
Biological enslavement.
Marriage is the ultimate pact. Remember, the title of his work centers on pacted control. Dr. Waleed likens the raw instinct of reproduction to a form of eating-taking from what one's right hand possesses to fulfill a drive.
Right, the blind desire to multiply.
But just as you cannot eat physical food indiscriminately without becoming diseased, and you cannot consume heritage blindly without becoming intellectually obese, you cannot reproduce blindly without corrupting the species.
Makes sense.
If a human being yields entirely to mere biological lust, to what the text categorizes as fornication or unregulated, unpacted connection, they are incredibly vulnerable.
Because they are just acting on the base code. They are behaving like a machine executing a script, rather than a sovereign intellect making a choice.
Precisely. By forcing that raw biological instinct through the structured, logical pact of marriage, you place rational parameters on your drive for immortality. You ensure that you are intentionally choosing where your legacy goes. You ensure that you are not grafting your family branch onto a diseased, malicious tree.
Grafting is the perfect word. If you take a healthy branch and graft it onto a poisoned trunk, the toxins flow up into the new branch and kill the fruit.
And for Dr. Waleed, mixing your lineage with a malicious tree ruins the pact for all future generations. It corrupts the intellectual and spiritual material of the offspring. You are passing down a flawed operating system.
It is about protecting the spiritual and intellectual integrity of the human species. It's not just about biological survival. I mean, a virus biologically survives. It's about ensuring the survival of the truth and the intellect within the species. You are trying to build an unbroken chain of logical, sovereign minds spanning across time, and you simply cannot do that if you bind yourself and your future children to a system of thought that is fundamentally broken or toxic.
That is the absolute core of his argument regarding reproduction. He states that the necessity of controlling this instinct was clarified by divine command to protect the lineage itself. The message is, beware of the malicious offspring that inevitably come from the malicious tree.
Wow.
Social connection and reproduction, in Dr. Waleed's view, must be an intentional, deeply pacted choice designed to preserve the light of the human intellect, not just a blind submission to the animal instinct to multiply.
The internal consistency of this philosophy is staggering. Once you accept the initial premise of the two instincts, everything else locks into place like clockwork. Right. The physical consumption of food, the intellectual consumption of knowledge, the accumulation of wealth, the paralyzing weight of historical tradition, the logical boundaries of marriage, it all stems from how we manage those two primal drives, possession and immortality.
And Dr. Waleed recognizes that he has built a massive interconnected system here. To ensure his readers fully grasp the scope of his theory, he concludes his text by bringing all of his linguistic analysis, theological interpretation, and psychological deduction into a single, cohesive summary.
Okay.
He constructs what he calls the matrix of instinct and control.
A matrix. Okay, let's build this matrix out because I think it will help synthesize everything we've been circling. If I am understanding his framework correctly, Dr. Waleed is essentially drawing a line down the center of the human experience. On one side, you have humanity operating on autopilot, what he calls the material or superficial practice of our instincts. And on the other side, you have humanity operating with elevated consciousness, the deep or pacted practice.
That is the exact structure of his matrix. He takes the core areas of human behavior we've discussed and maps out the consequences of choosing the superficial path versus the pacted path.
Let's see if we could deduce the rows of this matrix based on everything we've learned. The first major category would obviously be eating. So if I'm operating in the material, superficial practice of eating, what am I doing?
You are engaging in the blind devouring we discussed earlier. On a physical level, it is gluttony without purpose. But more dangerously, on an intellectual level, the superficial practice is the indiscriminate swallowing of toxic, unexamined heritage. It is eating without applying logic.
It is the path that leads straight to heritage obesity.
Yes. Now contrast that with the deep pacted practice of eating. What does that look like?
The pacted practice would mean I am applying the intellect as a filter. Eating is elevated to its highest form. I am intentionally extracting pure knowledge, the food of the spirit. And on a physical level, I am partaking only in lawful, logical provision that actually sustains me. I am controlling what enters my system.
And Dr. Waleed maps out the ultimate results of these two paths in the matrix. The superficial practice eating indiscriminately results in the heavy, paralyzing burden of tradition. Become a prisoner of the past.
Right.
The pacted practice eating purely and logically results in the lightness of the spirit. You achieve true intellectual agility and freedom.
So what does this all mean? It's the bloated, useless smartphone versus the newly optimized lightning-fast device. Okay, that's the first category. The second category has to be reproduction and connection. If a person is stuck in the superficial practice here, they're just yielding to raw biology.
Correct. The material, superficial practice of reproduction is blind biological lust. It is the unthinking, unregulated drive to multiply without any regard for the ideological, spiritual, or intellectual consequences for the offspring. It is physical connection entirely devoid of a logical pact.
Which means the deep pacted practice is intentional, guarded connection. It is engaging in marriage specifically with those who share a pure logical framework. It is controlling the primal instinct for immortality to ensure the integrity of the lineage.
And the outcomes listed in the matrix are stark. If you follow the superficial path of blind connection, Dr. Waleed says you end up grafting yourself to a malicious tree. You propagate a corrupt, destructive worldview into the future. But if you follow the pacted practice, you ensure the true, elevated survival of the species.
You maintain a lineage of sovereign, thinking individuals capable of recognizing truth.
Exactly.
That leaves the final category, which bridges the gap between the two instincts, possession, the drive to own and control. The material, superficial practice of possession has to be what we talked about regarding wealth.
It is. The superficial practice is usury, predatory lending, embezzlement, and the unjust consumption of other people's wealth. It is the desperate hoarding of external resources to exert power over others and satisfy an endless, gaping void of desire.
It's taking a massive piece of the whole just to starve everyone else, under the illusion that whoever has the most stuff is the most secure.
But the pacted practice of possession flips this entire concept internally. True possession, in Dr. Waleed's matrix, is not about owning external things. It is not about property or bank accounts. True possession is about achieving absolute sovereignty of the mind. It is self-mastery. It is possessing yourself.
Owning your own intellect. Because if you don't possess your own mind, something else will. So the result of superficial possession is actually humiliation. You think you are powerful because you hoard wealth, but you are ultimately a slave to your own endless desires. You are ruled by your stomach and your wallet.
Yes.
But the result of pacted possession is wisdom and true kingship.
True kingship. You are a king not because you rule over other people or because you own vast tracts of land, but because your mind unequivocally rules over your biology.
When you step back and look at this complete matrix, when you synthesize Dr. Waleed's entire framework, it paints a very specific picture of the human struggle. For me, the most profound realization here is his definition of the enemy.
Yeah.
In this text, The ultimate enslavement, the satanic manipulation, is not an external attack. It's not some cinematic demon possessing your body, and it's not a foreign army conquering your city. The existential threat comes entirely from within. It is the weaponization of your own biological code. The adversary simply pushes the buttons of your innate, God-given drives for possession and immortality.
It's all internal.
And if you haven't built a logical intellectual pact to govern those drives, you enthusiastically enslave yourself.
That is the exact conclusion Dr. Waleed drives toward. He explicitly notes in his closing arguments that the enemy does not need to attack from the outside. The attack happens through our own natural, unguarded drives. And his final plea to his readers is essentially a call to intellectual arms. He is urgently warning you to take control of your consumption. And it doesn't just mean your physical diet, he means your total, holistic, intellectual diet.
He is pleading with the reader to avoid the poisoned trees of corrupted heritage, to stop swallowing the past just because it is placed in front of you.
He urges his readers to eat freely, yes, but to eat only from pure logical knowledge, to use the sovereign intellect to filter, to discern, and to extract the truth from the noise. Because according to this framework, it is only by engaging in that deep, pacted practice of our primal instincts that humanity can achieve its intended state.
Absolute sovereignty of the mind.
That is the only way to avoid living your life as a helpless slave to your own biology.
It has been a genuinely incredible journey exploring human behavior through the highly specific analytical lens of Dr. Khaled Waleed. We started by stripping the impossibly complex human engine down to just two primal gears: the instinct to consume and possess, and the instinct to reproduce and endure.
We really did strip it down.
We explored how, by looking through Dr. Waleed's linguistic framework, eating transforms from a mundane biological necessity into a profound philosophical act of extracting a part from the whole to exert total control. We examined the terrifying reality of heritage obesity, diagnosing how a society becomes paralyzed, heavy, and docile by indiscriminately swallowing the unexamined weight of its own historical waste.
And we explored how he reinterpreted the ancient narrative of the forbidden tree, shifting it from a fable about a piece of fruit into a dire, highly logical warning against connecting our lineage to toxic, malicious ideologies. Through Dr. Waleed's matrix, we saw how the deepest, most base biological instincts we possess are actually the primary battlegrounds for our intellectual freedom.
This framework fundamentally reframes how you look at every single interaction you have with the world around you. And I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over, building directly on Dr. Waleed's definition of eating. Remember, he defines eating as extracting a piece of information or a resource from the continuous whole in order to exert control over it.
Right.
I want you to think about that definition as you go about the rest of your week. Take a hard, unforgiving look at your current media diet. Look at the endless, churning stream of articles, the bottomless social media feeds, the 24-hour news cycles, the videos, the podcasts. You are constantly, every single day, pulling pieces of data from that continuous digital whole and internalizing them.
We all are.
But based on the stark reality of Dr. Waleed's theory, ask yourself a very serious question. Are you actually extracting that information to build pure knowledge and exert sovereign control over your own life? Or is the sheer, uncurated volume of it just giving you heritage obesity? Is that endless consumption weighing down your mind, paralyzing your critical thinking, and silently, inevitably controlling you?
It is the ultimate test of human sovereignty. When you engage with the world, who is possessing whom?
Are you the king of your instincts, or are you just another blind consumer waiting to be hacked? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Dr. Khaled Waleed's pact of instinct and patent control. Keep questioning the unseen forces that drive your actions, fight to keep your mental steps light, and we will see you on the next deep dive.